Please, don't let him take me back. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. 7 words, whispered by a voice so small, so broken, that Dominic Caruso almost didn't hear them over the rain hammering down on the streets of Boston. It was past midnight, the kind of night where the city seemed to hold its breath, where the rain fell so hard it swallowed every sound except its own relentless drumming. Dom had just finished a 3-hour meeting at Vincenzo's, the Italian restaurant on Hanover Street that served as neutral ground for conversations that couldn't happen anywhere else. The deal was done. The territory lines were redrawn. Another night of business in a life built on business. He stepped out the back entrance into the alley. Luca Romano, 2 steps behind him, umbrella already raised. The black SUV waited at the end of the narrow passage, engine running, headlights cutting through the sheets of water. That's when Dom heard it. A sound that didn't belong, a small, choked whimper, the kind of noise a wounded animal makes when it's trying not to be found. Dom raised his hand. Luca stopped instantly. "Check it," Dom said quietly. Luca moved toward the row of dumpsters pressed against the brick wall, one hand reaching inside his jacket. He pulled back a sheet of cardboard leaning against the metal container, and froze. "Boss." His voice was strange. "You need to see this." Dom walked over, his leather shoes splashing through puddles he would normally avoid. He looked down, and something inside his chest locked tight. A child. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, curled into a ball between the dumpster and the wall. No shoes. Her bare feet were bleeding, cuts visible even in the dim light, raw flesh pressed against the wet concrete. She wore what had once been a purple dress, now torn and filthy, hanging off a frame so thin he could count every rib through the soaked fabric. Her hair was blonde, matted and dirty, plastered to her skull by the rain. Her lips were blue from cold. Her skin was pale as paper. But her eyes, God, her eyes, they were blue, huge, and they held something that made Dominic Caruso, a man who had seen death and dealt it without flinching, feel his stomach turn. Those were eyes that had witnessed hell, eyes that had stopped hoping for rescue and had learned only to expect more pain. She looked up at him, trembling so hard her teeth chattered, and she didn't scream, she didn't run. She just stared, like she was waiting for the next blow to fall. "Jesus Christ," Luca breathed. Dom crouched down slowly, the rain soaking through his $10,000 coat. He didn't care. He kept his movements deliberate, non-threatening, the way you approach a cornered animal. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, little one. It's okay." She didn't respond, didn't blink, just kept shaking. Footsteps splashed at the end of the alley. "There she is." Dom looked up. A man emerged from the shadows. Tall, lean, military bearing, short-cropped dark hair, a scar running across his left eyebrow, wearing a black tactical jacket despite the rain. He walked toward them with the casual confidence of someone who expected to be obeyed. Behind him, a black van sat idling, side door open. The man stopped 15 feet away, and Dom saw the handcuffs dangling from his left hand. Small handcuffs, child-sized. "The girl belongs to us," the man said, his accent thick, Russian. "Step away. This is not your concern." Dom didn't move. The little girl made a sound, a tiny, terrified keen, and then she did something that shattered whatever remained of Dominic Caruso's calculated detachment. She grabbed his leg, both of her small hands, bones like bird wings under the skin, wrapped around his calf and held on with desperate strength. She pressed her face against his knee, her whole body trembling, and she spoke. For the first time in 3 months, Lily Grace Hartley opened her mouth and formed words. "Please, don't let him take me back." Her voice was gravel, rust, a sound that had been locked away so long it barely remembered how to exist. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Dom looked down at the child clinging to him. Then he looked at the man with the handcuffs, at the van waiting in the darkness, at the rain washing blood from a 5-year-old's feet. Something shifted behind his eyes, something cold and final, like a door slamming shut. "This girl belongs to you?" Dom asked. His voice was soft, almost gentle, light as silk. Luca took a quiet step back. He knew that voice. Everyone who worked for Dominic Caruso knew that voice. It was the voice that came right before someone died. The Russian didn't flinch at Dom's tone. Either he was too arrogant to recognize danger, or too stupid. Dom suspected both. "The girl is merchandise," the man said, his voice flat and businesslike, as if discussing a shipment of electronics, property of the Kozlov organization. "She is being transported to a client, a very important client who has already paid. Merchandise, property, client." The words hit Dom like bullets, each one landing harder than the last. He understood immediately what he was looking at, what this man was, what that van held. Child trafficking. The rain kept falling, the little girl kept shaking against his leg, and somewhere deep in Dominic Caruso's mind, a door he had kept locked for 20 years blew open. He saw her, Isabella, 8 years old, brown curls, gap-toothed smile, standing in the doorway of their childhood home, waving goodbye as he left for school. "See you later, Dommy." That was the last time he saw her. 3 hours later, she was gone. Taken. Vanished into a nightmare that ended in a shallow grave outside Newark. Her body found 6 months later by a dog walker. He was 17. He couldn't save her. 20 years. 20 years of building an empire, of becoming the thing that monsters feared, of making sure no one ever took anything from him again. And now this child, this broken little girl with eyes full of hell, was gripping his leg like he was the only solid thing in a drowning world. Her fingers dug into the fabric of his trousers. Thin fingers, stick-like. He could feel every bone. "She comes with me," the Russian said, taking a step forward. "Now." Sergei Volkov. Dom recognized the type. Former military, probably Spetsnaz, now private muscle for whoever paid enough. The Kozlov Bratva had been expanding into Boston for 2 years, but they had been smart enough to stay out of Caruso territory. Until tonight. Sergei raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The van doors opened wider, and 4 men stepped out into the rain. Armed, tactical gear. They spread out in a loose formation, blocking the alley exit, 5 against 2. Sergei smiled. "You see, Mr. Caruso," Dom said quietly. "Dominic Caruso." The smile flickered, just for a second. But it flickered. Caruso. Sergei's eyes narrowed. "I have heard the name, but this is not your business. The girl is Kozlov property. Walk away, and there is no problem." Dom didn't respond. He simply moved his left hand, 2 fingers extended, a gesture so small it was almost invisible. Luca moved. 8 seconds. That's all it took. The first man dropped with a knife in his throat before he could raise his weapon. The second turned toward the sound and caught Luca's elbow across his temple, crumpling like wet paper. The third managed to get his gun up, but Luca was already inside his guard, redirecting the barrel, snapping the wrist, using the man's own weapon to put a bullet through the 4th man's knee. 8 seconds. 4 men down. Luca stood in the rain, barely breathing hard, the stolen gun now aimed at Sergei's chest. Sergei's hand moved toward his own weapon. "Don't," Dom said. Sergei drew anyway. The shot came from somewhere to Dom's right. He hadn't even seen Luca move again. But Sergei's gun clattered to the wet ground, and the Russian dropped to his knees, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "You," Sergei gasped, rain streaming down his face. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Dom looked at him. Really looked at him. And then he did something that surprised even Luca. He took off his coat, the cashmere overcoat, custom made, worth more than most people's monthly salary. He shrugged it off and crouched down, gently draping it over the trembling child still attached to his leg. The coat swallowed her whole. She disappeared inside it, just a small, pale face peering out from a sea of dark fabric, those blue eyes watching him with something that wasn't quite hope. Not yet. But not the dead emptiness of before. Dom reached down and picked her up. She weighed nothing, literally nothing, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in wet cloth. He could feel her ribs against his arm, her heart hammering against his chest like a trapped bird. She didn't fight him, didn't scream, just buried her face in his neck and held on. Dom stepped over Sergei, who was still kneeling in a spreading pool of rainwater and blood, and paused. "Go back to Viktor Kozlov," Dom said, his voice carrying clearly over the rain. "Tell him this girl belongs to me now." He started walking toward his SUV. "And tell him," Dom added without turning around, "if he wants her back, he knows where to find me." He climbed into the back seat, the child still clinging to him, still wrapped in his coat. Luca slid into the driver's seat and pulled away, leaving Sergei Volkov bleeding in the rain. In the warmth of the car, the little girl finally lifted her head. She looked at Dom with those 2 old eyes. "Are you—" Her voice cracked, broke. "Are you taking me somewhere bad?" Dom looked at her, at the bruises on her thin arms, at the scars peeking out from beneath the coat, at the fear that lived in every line of her body. "No," he said. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." She stared at him for a long moment, then she put her head back against his chest and closed her eyes. She didn't believe him, but she was too tired to run anymore. The Caruso estate sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds in Brookline, a Tuscan-style villa that had been in the family for 3 generations. 15 bedrooms, a staff of 20, security systems that rivaled government installations, and walls high enough to keep the world out. Tonight, those walls felt like a fortress. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at 2:17 a.m., medical bag in hand, asking no questions. She had been the family physician for 11 years. She knew when to speak and when to stay silent. Dom led her to the guest room on the 2nd floor, where Mrs. Rosa Santini had already prepared a bed. The little girl sat in the center of it, still wrapped in Dom's ruined coat, not moving, not speaking, barely blinking. "I need to examine her," Elena said quietly. "Alone, with just Rosa." Dom nodded and stepped outside. He stood in the hallway with Luca, arms crossed, staring at the closed door. Minutes passed. 10, 20, 30. The door opened. Elena stepped out. Her face told him everything before she spoke a single word. "The child's name is unknown," Elena began, her voice carefully controlled, but Dom caught the tremor underneath. "Approximate age, 5 years old. Physical condition." She paused, took a breath. "She has rope scars on both wrists and ankles, multiple layers, some old, some fresh. She's been restrained repeatedly over an extended period." Dom's hands curled into fists. "There are at least 12 circular burn marks on her back. Cigarette burns, different stages of healing. The oldest are several months old. The newest, maybe a week." Luca made a sound, something between a curse and a prayer. "Ribs 4 and 7 on the left side show signs of previous fractures that healed without medical treatment. Malunion, they were never set properly." Elena's voice wavered. "She weighs 31 pounds, Dom. The average 5-year-old weighs 40 to 45. She has the body weight of a 3-year-old. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, signs of prolonged neglect." Dom's knuckles cracked. The sound was loud in the silent hallway. "There's more," Elena said. "She hasn't spoken since Rosa brought her in. Not a word, not a sound, given the circumstances in which you found her. I believe she's experiencing selective mutism. It's a trauma response. Her mind has essentially shut down verbal communication as a defense mechanism." "She spoke to me," Dom said quietly. "In the alley. She asked me not to let them take her." Elena looked at him with something close to wonder. "Then you may be the first person she's felt safe enough to speak to in months. That's significant, Dom. That's enormous." Dom said nothing. "Boss," Luca started, his voice rough. "That girl, she's been through, I know." 2 words, flat, final. They carried the weight of every horror Elena had just described. Dom pushed open the door and stepped inside. The reaction was immediate. The little girl scrambled backward on the bed, pressing herself into the corner where the headboard met the wall. Her eyes went wide, pupils blown, body curling in on itself like she was trying to disappear. She wasn't looking at Dom. She was looking at every man who had ever hurt her, every shadow that had ever brought pain. She was terrified of him. Dom stopped moving. He understood instantly. Men had done this to her. Men had burned her, broken her, bound her like an animal. And now another man had just walked into her space. Slowly, carefully, Dom lowered himself to the floor. He sat down on the carpet, 5 feet from the bed, making himself small, his back against the wall, his hands visible and open on his knees. He didn't approach her, didn't reach for her, just sat there, at her level, occupying as little space as possible. "No one here is going to hurt you," he said softly. "I promise." The girl didn't respond, but she was watching him now, not with the blind terror of before, but with cautious, calculating attention, measuring him. "My name is Dominic," he continued, "but you can call me Dom, or nothing at all. You don't have to say anything you don't want to say." She still didn't speak, but something shifted in her posture, a fraction less tense, a millimeter of eased fear. It was enough. The door opened quietly, and Mrs. Rosa entered carrying a small tray. On it sat a single cup of warm milk and a plate of plain crackers. Rosa set the tray on the nightstand and stepped back, giving the child space. Her eyes were red. She had been crying in the hallway. She had raised 2 children and buried 1 grandchild, but she had never seen anything like the marks on this little girl's body. The child's gaze fixed on the cup of milk. She stared at it like it was something from another planet, like she had never seen such a thing in her life. Her eyes moved from the cup to Dom, then back to the cup, then back to Dom again, asking permission to drink a cup of milk. Dom felt something crack inside his chest. "It's for you," he said gently. "You can have it." The girl looked at him one more time. Then, slowly, She reached out her small, scarred hand toward the cup. Tony Marino had been awake for 3 hours, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards, screens casting blue light across his face in the basement tech center of the Caruso estate. They called him Tech for a reason. There wasn't a database he couldn't crack, a firewall he couldn't breach, a secret he couldn't unearth. But tonight, what he found made him want to vomit. "Got her," Tony said as Dom and Marco entered the room. The girl's name is Lily Grace Hartley, age 5, born March 15th, 2019, in Hartford, Connecticut. He pulled up a photograph on the center screen. Dom stopped breathing. It was a family portrait, professional, taken in a studio with soft lighting and a cream-colored backdrop. A father with kind eyes and a gentle smile. A mother with honey blonde hair, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. And between them, a little girl. The same blonde hair, the same blue eyes. But in this photograph, those eyes were sparkling with life. Her cheeks were round and pink. She was laughing at something off camera, gap-toothed and joyful, wearing a purple dress with white flowers. The same purple dress, now torn and filthy, wrapped around a skeleton. Her parents were Daniel and Sarah Hartley. Tony continued, his voice flat, controlled. 6 months ago, their home was invaded. Official police report says burglary gone wrong. Both parents were killed. The daughter was listed as missing, presumed dead. Marco Benedetti stood behind Tony, his weathered face carved from stone. At 62, the old consigliere had seen everything, but his eyes were dark with something that looked like grief. "It wasn't a burglary," Marco said quietly. "I've been tracking Kozlov's operations for months. This is their pattern. They target families in quiet neighborhoods, kill the parents, take the children, make it look like random violence." "Why?" Luca asked from the doorway. "Because orphans are easier to sell," Tony said bitterly. "No one comes looking for them. The case goes cold. The child disappears into the system." He typed again, and a new document appeared on screen. A shipping manifest. Dates, locations, code names. Lily has been moved through 3 transit points in 6 months. Hartford to Newark, Newark to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Boston. Last night was supposed to be her final transfer. "To where?" Dom asked. Tony's jaw tightened. "The buyer is listed only as Client 47. Based on the price point, $2 million and the specifications requested, I'd guess private collector. Somewhere overseas. She would have been gone by morning. We would never have found her." Silence filled the room. Heavy, suffocating. 2 floors above, the bathroom was filled with steam and the sound of running water. Mrs. Rosa knelt beside the tub, her sleeves rolled up, gently pouring warm water over Lily's back with a plastic cup. She had seen the burns, the scars, the places where childhood should have been and wasn't. Lily sat motionless in the shallow water, arms wrapped around her knees, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She didn't sob, didn't make a sound, just cried without noise, the way children learn to cry when crying out loud brings punishment. She didn't fight Rosa, didn't resist. Her body was limp, compliant, conditioned through months of horror to simply endure whatever was done to it. That compliance broke Rosa more than screaming ever could. "No, no, no," Rosa whispered, her own tears falling now. She turned off the water and climbed into the tub fully clothed, gathering the tiny girl into her arms. "No more, little one, no more." They sat there together on the tile floor, an old woman and a broken child, holding each other while the water grew cold. Lily looked up at Rosa's face, saw the tears, and something like confusion flickered in her eyes. She didn't understand. She didn't understand why a grown-up was crying for her. Downstairs, Dom stared at the family photograph still frozen on the screen. The laughing girl in the purple dress, the parents who had loved her enough to frame that moment forever, all of them gone now. The parents in the ground, the laughter erased, the child reduced to bones and fear. "Get me everything on Kozlov's network," Dom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every name, every route, every buyer. I want to know everything. It's going to mean war," Marco said carefully. "Kozlov won't let this go. That child represents significant investment to him." Investment. Dom spat the word like poison. "She's 5 years old." His phone buzzed in his pocket. "Unknown number." Dom answered. "Dominic Caruso." The voice was smooth, cultured, carrying the faint lilt of a Russian accent wrapped in expensive education. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Dom's grip tightened on the phone. "My name is Viktor Kozlov, and you just stole $2 million from me." A pause. A soft laugh. "I want it back." Dom walked out of the tech room into the empty hallway, phone pressed to his ear, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. $2 million, Viktor Kozlov repeated, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. That's what my client paid for that particular product. Premium price for premium merchandise. Blonde hair, blue eyes, young enough to be moldable, you understand. Dom's jaw clenched so hard he felt his teeth crack. She's not merchandise. Of course she is. Kozlov laughed softly, a cultured sound that belonged in opera houses and charity galas. Everything is merchandise, Mr. Caruso. You, me, the girl. We are all commodities. The only difference is the price tag. She's 5 years old. Yes. That's precisely why she's worth $2 million. The younger they are, the higher the value. Surely a businessman of your caliber understands supply and demand. Dom stopped walking. His free hand pressed flat against the wall, steadying himself against the wave of rage threatening to drown his self-control. Here is my offer, Kozlov continued pleasantly. Return the girl within 24 hours, and we forget this misunderstanding. No harm done. Or, if you've grown, attached, you can purchase her yourself. $2 million, plus $500,000 for the inconvenience. Cash. Untraceable. I'm a reasonable man. You killed her parents. A brief pause. Ah, you've done your research. Yes, unfortunate but necessary. Clean acquisitions require clean backgrounds. Orphans are so much simpler than kidnapping victims, don't you think? No one searches for children who are already presumed dead. Dom closed his eyes, saw the family portrait, the laughing girl in the purple dress, the parents who would never hold her again. Her name is Lily, Dom said quietly. Lily Grace Hartley. She has a name. She had a family. And you butchered them like animals to sell their daughter. Sentimentality. Kozlov's voice hardened slightly. I expected better from the head of the Caruso family. We are not so different, you and I. We both trade in human lives. We both profit from darkness. The only difference is, I'm honest about what I am. We are nothing alike. No? How many men have died on your orders, Caruso? How many families have wept because of your business decisions? You wrap yourself in codes and honor, but underneath, you are the same as me, a predator, a monster. The only question is which monster wins. Upstairs, in a bedroom filled with soft lamplight, Mrs. Rosa sat behind Lily on the bed, gently working a wide-toothed comb through the girl's freshly washed hair. The tangles were gone now, the filth washed away, revealing pale gold strands that fell past her thin shoulders. Such beautiful hair, Rosa murmured softly, like sunshine. Lily sat perfectly still, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror across the room. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, as if looking at a stranger. Rosa understood. The girl didn't recognize herself anymore. The child in that mirror didn't match whoever she remembered being before. You know, Rosa continued, her voice gentle and warm. When Dominic was little, he had hair that stuck up in every direction. No matter what I did, it would not behave. His mother used to joke that he was born fighting, even his hair. Lily didn't respond, but her head tilted slightly, listening. He had a sister, Isabella. She was the sweet one, always laughing, always singing. She used to follow Dominic everywhere, like a little shadow. He pretended it annoyed him, but he loved her more than anything in the world. Rosa's voice softened with old grief. She was taken when she was 8 years old. Dominic was 17. He never forgave himself for not being there to protect her. Lily's reflection blinked. Something flickered in those hollow blue eyes. Then, slowly, so slowly, her small hand reached out and touched Rosa's wrist. Just a touch, featherlight, barely there, but Rosa felt it like an earthquake. It was the first time Lily had voluntarily touched another human being since arriving at this house. The first time she had reached out instead of pulling away. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move, didn't breathe, afraid to break the moment. In the hallway below, Dom's voice had turned to ice. Listen carefully, Kozlov. The girl stays with me. She is not for sale. She is not merchandise. She is not a commodity. And if you want her, you'll have to come through me to get her. Silence on the line. Then Kozlov spoke, all pretense of pleasantry gone. You've just declared war on me, Caruso. No. Dom's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. You declared war on me the moment you put your hands on a child. The line went dead. Dom lowered the phone and turned to Marco, who had been standing silently in the shadows. Triple the security, Dom said. Every entrance, every exit, every window. I want men on the roof and in the trees. I want motion sensors on every inch of the perimeter. Marco nodded slowly. And if Kozlov comes? Dom's eyes were dark, empty. The eyes of a man who had already made his decision. Then we kill everyone he brings with him. 3 days passed like slow water. Lily still didn't speak. Not a word, not a sound, but something was shifting inside her. Small movements beneath the surface, like ice beginning to crack on a frozen lake. She ate now. Not much, a few bites of toast, half a bowl of soup, small pieces of fruit that Rosa cut into careful shapes. But she no longer flinched when food was placed in front of her. She no longer waited for permission to lift the spoon. She let Rosa touch her, let the old woman brush her hair, help her dress, hold her hand when they walked through the long hallways of the estate. She didn't lean into the contact, but she didn't pull away either. And she followed Dom, not closely, never closely, but whenever he moved through the house, a small shadow trailed behind him, always at a distance, always watching. She would stand in doorways, peer around corners, track his movements with those enormous blue eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. Dom pretended not to notice, but he noticed. On the third evening, Dom sat in his study reviewing intelligence reports on Kozlov's network. Maps spread across his desk, photographs pinned to a corkboard, financial records highlighting suspicious transfers. War was coming. He could feel it in his bones. A flicker of movement at the door. Dom didn't look up from the documents. "You can come in," he said quietly. Silence. Then, the spot with the clearest path to the exit. Smart girl. Always planning escape routes. Dom continued working. Minutes passed. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. Rain began to patter against the windows, gentle and rhythmic. Finally, Dom set down his pen and turned in his chair. Lily sat curled in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped around a small brown teddy bear that Rosa had bought her 2 days ago. She watched him with unblinking attention, her body tense but not trembling. "Progress. Are you hungry?" Dom asked. She shook her head. "Are you cold?" Another shake. Dom leaned forward slightly, his voice softening. "Are you scared?" Lily went still, completely, perfectly still. Then, slowly, her chin dipped. A single nod. Dom rose from his chair, and Lily's body immediately tensed, preparing for something bad. He stopped. Then, carefully, he lowered himself to the floor, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, putting himself at her level. "I used to be scared too," he said quietly. "When I was young, when my sister was taken." Lily's eyes flickered, listening. Her name was Isabella. She was 8 years old. One day she was there, laughing, pulling my hair, driving me crazy. The next day she was gone. Dom's voice remained steady, but his hands lay flat on his knees, pressing hard. "When they took her, I was so scared I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything." He looked directly at Lily. "I was supposed to protect her. That was my job. Big brothers protect little sisters. But I failed. And she died because I wasn't there." The rain fell harder outside. Inside, the room was perfectly silent. "I was scared for a long time after that," Dom continued. "Years. Every night, I was scared. Every morning, I was scared. I thought the fear would never stop." Lily's arms tightened around her bear, but then something changed. Dom's eyes held hers, dark and steady. "I stopped being the one who was afraid. I became the thing that other people fear." He let that sit in the air between them. "Now, when bad men think about hurting someone I care about, they have to think about me first, and most of them decide it isn't worth the risk." Lily stared at him, and for the first time since the alley, her eyes weren't empty. There was something there, a spark, a question. Then she moved. She stood up slowly, still clutching the bear, and walked toward him. Small, careful steps, like a wild animal approaching an unknown thing. She stopped, just out of arm's reach, and she placed the teddy bear on his knee. Dom looked down at the small stuffed animal, then back up at her face. Lily opened her mouth. Her throat worked, and then words came out rough, rusty, scraped raw from 3 months of silence. "Lily, not scared. When here." 7 words. 7 words that hit Dominic Caruso harder than any bullet ever could. She had been silent for 3 months. She had watched her parents die, been sold like livestock, been transported across state lines, been prepared for a fate worse than death. And in all that time, she had not spoken a single word to anyone. But she spoke to him. Dom didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat there on the floor of his study, a teddy bear on his knee, looking at a broken little girl who had just given him something she hadn't given anyone else in 90 days. Her voice, her trust. After that night in the study, something changed. Lily began to follow Dom everywhere. Not close, never close, but always there, a small ghost drifting 10 feet behind him, watching, waiting, tracking his movements through the house like he was the only fixed point in her spinning world. Dom walked to the kitchen. Lily appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later. Dom went to his office. Lily settled in her corner, barren arms, eyes never leaving him. Dom met with his lieutenants in the conference room. Lily sat on the floor by the window, a box of crayons Rosa had given her, drawing pictures no one was allowed to see. Luca noticed first. "Boss," he said one afternoon, watching Lily trail Dom down the hallway at her usual distance. "I think you've got a new bodyguard." Dom glanced back at the small figure hovering near the staircase. "She's not bothering anyone." "Didn't say she was." Luca grinned. "Just saying. Smallest soldier in the Caruso army." Dom shot him a look that would have made most men flinch. Luca just kept grinning. The small moments accumulated like snowfall. At dinner, Lily sat beside Dom at the long dining table, dwarfed by the massive chair, her feet dangling a foot above the floor. She wouldn't eat until he ate first. Every meal, she watched him take the first bite, waited, then slowly lifted her own fork, testing for poison, making sure the food was safe. It broke Rosa's heart every time. In the study, while Dom read reports and signed documents, Lily curled up on the leather sofa across the room. One evening, Dom looked up from his work to find her asleep, the teddy bear clutched to her chest, her breathing slow and even. She had fallen asleep in his presence, a child who had spent months being hurt by adults, who had learned that closing her eyes around people meant danger, had fallen asleep in his office like it was the safest place in the world. Dom didn't move for an hour, just sat there, watching her sleep, something unnamed and heavy settling in his chest. At 2:47 a.m., the perimeter alarm screamed to life. Dom was out of bed and down the stairs in 30 seconds, gun in hand, Luca already at the security console. Through the monitors, they watched a dark figure sprint away from the main gate, disappearing into the trees beyond the property line. "What did they leave?" Dom asked. Luca zoomed in on the gate camera. A doll lay on the wet ground just inside the iron bars. Blonde hair, blue dress. It had been torn apart, limbs ripped off, stuffing scattered like snow. A piece of paper was pinned to its chest. Luca retrieved it 5 minutes later, wearing gloves, handling it by the edges. The message was written in red ink. 2 million, or the girl. Dom's face didn't change, but his eyes went dead. "Burn it," he said. "She doesn't see this. She doesn't hear about this." "Understood?" Luca nodded. By dawn, Tony had cracked the encryption on a series of messages intercepted from Kozlov's network. "They're planning something big," Tony said, pulling up the data on his screens. Multiple references to extraction and timeline. "Based on the communication patterns, I'd estimate we have 48 hours. Maybe less." Marco stood at Dom's shoulder, his weathered face grim. "He's not going to negotiate. He's going to take her by force. Then we don't let him." Dom turned to face the room, where his most trusted men had gathered. Luca, Marco, Tony, 6 capos who controlled different sectors of his operation, triple the guard rotation. "I want snipers on the roof, patrols in the grounds, motion sensors on every inch of the perimeter. No one gets in or out without my knowledge." "And if they breach?" one of the capos asked. "They won't." Dom's voice left no room for argument. As the meeting continued, Dom's eyes drifted to the security monitor on the wall. The camera showed the upstairs hallway, Lily's bedroom. She was standing at the window, her small silhouette framed against the dark glass. The teddy bear hung from one hand. She wasn't looking at anything inside the room. She was staring out into the night, watching the darkness, as if she knew something was coming, as if she could feel it, the way animals sense a storm before it breaks. Dom watched her watch the darkness, and he made a silent promise. Whatever came through those gates, whatever army Kozlov sent, whatever violence descended on this house, it would have to go through him first. Every single one of them. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and butter. Dom paused in the doorway, momentarily frozen by the scene before him. Mrs. Rosa stood at the marble counter, her apron dusted with flour, rolling out dough with practiced hands. And beside her, perched on a wooden stool that Rosa had dragged from the pantry, was Lily. The little girl was covered in flour. It streaked through her blonde hair, dusted her cheeks like snow, coated her small hands up to the wrists. A mixing bowl sat in front of her, half filled with batter she had been stirring with a wooden spoon too big for her grip. She was concentrating so hard her tongue poked out between her lips. Dom couldn't move. 20 years collapsed in an instant. Suddenly, he was 17 again. standing in the doorway of his mother's kitchen, watching Isabella kneel on a chair at the counter, her small hands deep in cookie dough, flour everywhere, their mother laughing as she tried to keep order in the chaos. "Dommy, look, I'm making cookies for you." The memory hit him like a fist to the chest. Then Lily looked up. Her blue eyes found him across the kitchen, and something in her face changed. Not fear. Not the careful blankness she wore like armor. Something else. She lifted her flour-covered hands toward him. "Lily, make cake," she said, her voice still rough from disuse but stronger than before. "For you." Dom walked forward. His legs moved without his permission, carrying him across the kitchen until he stood beside the stool. He looked down at the messy batter, at the flour-dusted child, at the small offering she was extending toward him. "Rosa," he said quietly, "can we try some?" Rosa's eyes were already wet. "It's not cooked yet, Dominic. It's just batter, I know." He pulled out a chair and sat down, putting himself at Lily's level. She watched him with that intense, measuring gaze, then scooped a glob of raw batter onto the wooden spoon and held it out. Dom took the spoon, ate the batter. It was too sweet and slightly lumpy and absolutely perfect. "Good," he said seriously, nodding like a food critic at a 5-star restaurant. "Very good." Lily stared at him, and then she smiled. It was small, barely there, just the slightest curve of her lips, a ghost of what a smile should be. Her face seemed unsure of the expression, like muscles remembering a movement they hadn't made in a very long time, but it was a smile, the first one since she had arrived at this house. The first one, Dom suspected, in 6 months. Something cracked open inside his chest, something he had kept locked away since he was 17 years old, standing over an open grave, making promises to a sister who could no longer hear them. Rosa turned away, pressing her hand over her mouth. Dom stayed perfectly still, afraid that any movement might break the spell. That evening, after dinner, Dom carried Lily upstairs. She had fallen asleep at the table, her head drooping lower and lower until it rested against his arm. He lifted her without waking her, marveling again at how little she weighed, and carried her to her room. The bed was too big for her. She looked like a doll lost in an ocean of white sheets. Dom pulled the blanket up to her chin and tucked the teddy bear under her arm. He was turning to leave when he felt it. Small fingers wrapped around his hand. "Stay," Lily whispered, her eyes still closed. "Please, stay." Dom looked down at her, at the scars he couldn't see beneath the blanket, at the bruises that were finally starting to fade, at the trust she was offering him, fragile as spun glass. He sat down on the edge of the bed. "I'm here," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily's grip tightened for a moment, then slowly relaxed as sleep took her. But she didn't let go. Even in unconsciousness, she held on to him like an anchor. Dom sat there in the darkness, watching her breathe. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with his free hand, careful not to wake her. A message from Marco. Intelligence was wrong. Kozlov moved up the timeline. "They're coming tonight." Dom looked at the phone, then at the sleeping child, then at the window, where darkness pressed against the glass like a living thing. The storm had arrived. 3:07 a.m. The lights died. Every lamp, every screen, every glowing indicator in the Caruso estate went black simultaneously. The security systems screamed for 3 seconds, then fell silent as the backup generators failed to engage. Sabotage. They had cut the power and the backups. Dom was already moving. He had fallen asleep in the chair beside Lily's bed, her small hand still wrapped around his fingers. The moment the darkness fell, he was on his feet, gun drawn, instincts overriding everything else. Emergency lights flickered to life along the baseboards, casting the hallway in dim red, like the inside of a dying heart. Dom looked at the bed. Lily was awake. She stood in the center of the mattress, teddy bear clutched to her chest, blue eyes wide and luminous in the crimson light. She wasn't crying, wasn't screaming, wasn't even trembling. She just stood there, perfectly still, perfectly silent, waiting. It was the posture of a child who had learned that making noise during danger brought punishment. The posture of a survivor who had been hunted before and knew exactly what was coming. Dom's chest tightened. "Lily," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Come with me. Now." She climbed off the bed immediately, moving to his side without hesitation. Her hand found his in the darkness and held on. Rosa appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her face pale but composed. Behind her, 2 armed guards flanked the entrance. "Safe room," Dom ordered. "Take her. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Rosa reached for Lily's hand, but the girl pulled back, pressing herself against Dom's leg. No. Her voice was small but fierce. Stay with you. Dom knelt down, bringing himself to her level. The red emergency lights painted shadows across his face. Lily, listen to me carefully. He held her gaze, willing her to understand. Bad men are coming. I have to fight them. I have to keep them away from you. But I can't do that if I'm worried about where you are. But her voice cracked. What if you don't come back? The question hung in the air like smoke. Dom reached out and cupped her face in his hands. So small, so fragile. A life that had already been shattered once and was only beginning to piece itself back together. I will come back, he said. I promise you, Lily. I will come back. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at the teddy bear in her arms. The bear Rosa had given her. The bear she hadn't let go of since the first night. Slowly, she held it out to him. Keep him, she whispered. Lily want him back. So you have to come back. Dom took the bear. The worn fur was soft against his fingers. I'll keep him safe, he said. And I'll bring him back to you. Lily nodded once. Then she let Rosa take her hand and lead her toward the basement, toward the reinforced room that had been built into the foundation of the house for exactly this purpose. Dom watched her go until she disappeared around the corner. Then he tucked the teddy bear inside his jacket, against his chest, and went to war. The first wave hit the east gate. 40 men, maybe more. They came out of the darkness like ghosts, armed with automatic weapons and military precision. Kozlov had sent his best. Dom's 25 defenders met them with everything they had. Gunfire erupted across the grounds. Muzzle flashes lit up the night like lightning. Glass shattered. Men screamed. The air filled with smoke and the copper smell of blood. Dom commanded from the security center, watching through backup cameras powered by a tertiary generator Tony had hidden in the walls. 3 monitors showed different angles of the assault, 3 directions of attack, just as he had predicted. East gate holding. Luca's voice crackled through the radio. But they keep coming. North perimeter breached. Another voice reported. We're falling back to secondary positions. West side clear for now. They're probing, not committing. Dom's eyes moved constantly between screens, tracking movements, calculating trajectories, directing his men like chess pieces across a board painted in blood. Then Luca's voice cut through again, sharp with alarm. Boss, we've got a problem. Dom grabbed the radio. Report. A group broke off from the main assault. 6 men, maybe 8. They're not heading for the house. Luca's breath came hard and fast. They found the emergency tunnel. They're underground. They're heading straight for the safe room. Dom's blood turned to ice. The tunnel, the escape route, the one weakness in his fortress. And Lily was at the end of it. Dom ran. Not the measured pace of a strategist. Not the calculated movement of a leader. He ran with the desperate, animal speed of a man who knew that everything he had left to lose was about to be taken from him. The basement corridor stretched before him, emergency lights painting the walls in bloody red. Behind him, the sounds of battle continued to rage through the upper floors. Ahead, silence. Silence that terrified him more than any gunfire. He reached the reinforced door of the safe room and felt his heart stop. It was open. The steel door, 12 inches thick, designed to withstand explosives, hung ajar. The electronic lock had been bypassed. The backup mechanism disabled. Inside, bodies. 2 of his guards lay crumpled on the floor, their blood pooling together in the dim light. They had died defending the entrance. They had died failing, and in the center of the room, illuminated by a single emergency bulb, stood Sergei Volkov. His shoulder was bandaged where Dom had shot him 5 days ago. His face was twisted with savage triumph. 4 armed men flanked him, weapons raised. Rosa lay slumped against the wall, clutching her shoulder, blood seeping between her fingers. She had been shot trying to protect Lily. Even now, even wounded, she was trying to position herself between the child and the monster. Move, old woman, Sergei said, his voice cold. I only need the girl. Lily stood behind Rosa, pressed against the concrete wall. Her face was pale, her eyes enormous in the red light. She was trembling, but she wasn't hiding. Something flickered through her mind. Memories, flashes, the van, the handcuffs, the rooms where they kept her, the men who came and went and took and hurt. 3 months of darkness, 6 months of hell. Every time she had been grabbed before, she had gone limp, had let them drag her, had made herself small and silent and compliant, because fighting only made things worse. But this time was different. This time, Rosa was bleeding because of her. This time, there were people who actually wanted to keep her safe. This time, there was someone worth protecting. Lily stepped out from behind Rosa. No, she said. Her voice was small, shaking. But it was there. No, hurt. Grandma. Sergei's eyebrows rose. The little mouse speaks. He smiled. A cold, cruel expression. How sweet. Now come with me before I put another bullet in the old woman's head. He reached for Lily. The door exploded inward. Dom came through like a force of nature. His gun rose and fired in a single fluid motion. 4 shots, 4 bodies. The armed men dropped before they could even turn, neat holes in the center of their foreheads. Sergei spun, dragging Lily in front of him, his arm wrapped around her throat, his gun pressed to her temple. "Stop!" Sergei screamed. "One more step, Caruso, and the girl dies." Dom froze. His weapon was raised, aimed at Sergei's head. A perfect shot. He had made harder shots in his sleep, but Lily was in the way. Lily was the shield. And if Sergei's finger so much as twitched, "Put down the gun," Sergei commanded, backing toward the secondary exit. "Put it down, or I blow her brains out right here." Dom didn't move, his eyes locked with Lily's. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, but her eyes weren't vacant, weren't defeated. There was something burning in them, something fierce. She looked at Dom. Then she looked down at Sergei's hand, the one wrapped around her upper arm, holding her in place. And then Lily Grace Hartley, 5 years old, survivor of horrors no child should ever know, did the only thing she could think of. She bit down on Sergei's hand with every ounce of strength her small jaw possessed. Her teeth sank through skin and muscle. She tasted blood. Sergei screamed, a sound of pure shock and fury, and his grip loosened for just a fraction of a second. Lily dropped to the floor. Dom fired. The bullet caught Sergei in the center of his chest. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened, and then he was falling, his body crumpling to the ground, but his finger was already squeezing the trigger. The gun went off. Dom saw the muzzle flash, saw the trajectory, saw exactly where the bullet was going, straight toward Lily. He couldn't move fast enough, couldn't reach her, couldn't stop it. The bullet found her. The bullet tore through Lily's left shoulder. She fell. Not dramatically. Not with a scream or a cry or any of the sounds a child should make when violence rips through their body. She simply crumpled, folding onto the concrete floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. And then she looked down at the wound. Blood was spreading across her white nightgown, a crimson bloom growing larger with each heartbeat. She stared at it with an expression that shattered something deep inside Dominic Caruso. Acceptance. Not shock. Not horror. Just quiet, weary acceptance. The face of a child who had been hurt so many times, in so many ways, that pain no longer surprised her. The face of someone who expected suffering as naturally as breathing. Time stopped. Dom stood frozen in the doorway, and he was no longer in the basement of his estate. He was 17 years old, standing in a warehouse in Newark, looking down at a small body lying in a pool of blood that had long since stopped flowing. Isabella. Brown curls matted and dirty, eyes open but seeing nothing, her purple dress, her favorite dress, torn and stained. He had arrived too late, minutes too late, an eternity too late. For 20 years, that image had lived behind his eyes. For 20 years, he had carried the weight of his failure like a stone in his chest. No, the word exploded through his mind, shattering the paralysis. Not again. Not this time. Dom crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside Lily. He gathered her into his arms, pulling her against his chest, pressing his hand over the wound. Her blood soaked through his fingers, warm and wet, spreading across his white shirt like a death sentence. "Lily," he said, his voice cracking on her name. "Lily, look at me. Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, those blue eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, endured too much. They found his face and focused with effort. "Lily," she whispered, her voice thin as paper. "Lily, protect you." Dom felt tears burning in his eyes. When was the last time he had cried? He couldn't remember. Why? The word tore out of him. "Why did you do that? You should have stayed down. You should have, because..." She struggled to breathe. Every word cost her. "You, first. Good person." Her small hand lifted, trembling, and touched his cheek. "First. Good person." To Lily. Her eyes closed. "No." Dom shook her gently. "No, no, no. Lily, Lily." She didn't respond, but she was breathing. He could feel her chest rising and falling against his arm. Shallow, weak, but there. He yanked the radio from his belt. "Elena." His voice was a roar. "I need you in the safe room now. The child's been shot. Now. Static. Then Elena's voice, steady despite the chaos. On my way. 2 minutes. Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Luca appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn, face streaked with smoke and blood. Boss, he said, breathing hard. Kozlov's men are retreating. We've got them on the run. We won. He stopped when he saw Lily in Dom's arms. Oh, God. Find Kozlov. Dom's voice was something Luca had never heard before. Not anger, not rage, something beyond both. Something that sounded like the end of the world. Find him. Track him. Hunt him to the ends of the earth if you have to. I want him alive. Luca nodded once, his face pale. Alive. Got it. I want to kill him myself. Luca disappeared. Dr. Elena burst into the room 30 seconds later, medical bag in hand. She dropped beside Dom and began working immediately, cutting away Lily's nightgown, examining the wound. Through and through, Elena said, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Missed the artery. Missed the bone. She's lost blood, but she'll live. Dom, she's going to live. Dom didn't release his grip on the child. Dom, Elena's voice sharpened. I need to work. You have to let her go. He forced his arms to open, forced himself to lay Lily gently on the floor, forced himself to step back. Elena worked over the small body, applying pressure, starting an IV, doing everything medicine could do. And then she looked up at Dom, her face changing. Dom, you're bleeding. He looked down. His shirt was soaked with blood. Not all of it was Lily's. A dark stain was spreading from his right hip, and now that Elena mentioned it, he could feel it, a burning, tearing pain that he had somehow completely ignored. He had been shot. During the fight, he didn't even know when. It's nothing, he said. It's not nothing. You need save her. Dom's eyes were fixed on Lily's pale face. Save her first. Everything else can wait. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to her patient. In Dom's jacket, pressed against his heart, the teddy bear was soaked with blood. 36 hours. That's how long Lily slept. 36 hours of machines beeping, IV drips flowing, and one man refusing to leave her side. The medical suite on the 3rd floor of the Caruso estate had been transformed into a small hospital. Dr. Elena had called in a pediatric surgeon, a blood specialist, an anesthesiologist. They had operated for 2 hours, cleaned the wound, repaired the damage, and then stepped back and let the girl's body do what children's bodies do. Heal, fight, survive. When Lily's eyes finally opened, the first thing she saw was white. White ceiling, white walls, white sheets. Terror seized her chest. She knew white rooms. White rooms were where they kept her between transfers. White rooms were where men in coats examined her like merchandise. White rooms meant she had been caught again, sold again, sent somewhere new and terrible. She tried to move, tried to run, but pain exploded through her shoulder and she couldn't. Then she felt it. Warmth, pressure. Someone holding her hand. She turned her head, slowly, carefully, and saw him. Dom sat in a chair beside her bed, slumped forward, his head resting on the mattress near her hip. His hand was wrapped around hers, gentle but firm, like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. His face was turned toward her, eyes closed, dark circles carved beneath them like bruises. He was asleep. Lily didn't move, didn't make a sound. She just lay there, watching him breathe, feeling the steady pressure of his fingers around hers. The room came into focus around her. Flowers on the nightstand, bright and colorful. Balloons tied to the bed frame, swaying gently in the air from the heating vent. And there, tucked against her pillow, her teddy bear. He looked different, cleaner somehow, like someone had washed him. In the corner, Rosa sat in an armchair, her left arm wrapped in bandages, her eyes wet with tears. "You're awake," Rosa whispered. The sound made Dom stir. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found Lily's face. He sat up straight, his hand tightening around hers. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "You're awake." It was the first time Lily had heard him sound uncertain, the first time his voice had wavered. She looked at his face, at the lines of exhaustion carved into his features, at the dried tracks on his cheeks that could only have been left by one thing. "You cry?" she asked softly. Dom's jaw tightened. "No, I don't cry." Rosa made a small sound from her chair. "He's been sitting there for 36 hours straight," she said quietly. "Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just held your hand and waited." Lily looked at Dom, at the man who had killed for her, who had bled for her, who had sat beside her bed for a day and a half, holding her hand, refusing to leave. No one had ever done that for her, not even before, Not even when she had parents. Something broke open inside her chest, and words came out that she didn't plan, didn't think about, didn't even know she was going to say, until they were already hanging in the air between them. Can Lily call you? She stopped, swallowed. Her heart was pounding. Daddy? The room went completely still. Dom stood up so abruptly the chair scraped against the floor. He turned away, walking to the window, his back to the room. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. Silence stretched like a held breath. Lily felt tears welling in her eyes. She had done something wrong, asked for something she shouldn't have. She was always doing that, always making mistakes, always. Sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. Lily, sorry? Lily, not, don't. Dom's voice was hoarse, raw. He still hadn't turned around. Don't apologize. More silence. Lily could see his reflection in the window glass, could see him raise a hand and drag it across his face. Then he turned. His eyes were red, wet, the eyes of a man who hadn't cried in 20 years, finally reaching his breaking point. He walked back to her bed and knelt down, bringing himself to her level, his face close to hers. If you want, he said, his voice barely a whisper, you can call me anything you want. Children heal faster than adults. It's one of the miracles of youth. Bones knit, wounds close, bodies rebuild themselves with a resilience that defies logic. Within a week, Lily was sitting up in bed. Within 2 weeks, she was walking around the estate, her left arm in a sling, her steps careful but steady, and she was talking. Not just single words anymore, not just fragments, full sentences, flowing like water finally released from a dam. Dr. Elena called it therapeutic disclosure. When a trauma survivor finally feels safe enough, when they believe they won't be punished or disbelieved or sent back to the nightmare, the stories start to come, piece by piece, memory by memory. Lily told them everything. She told Rosa about the night the bad men came to her house, about hiding under her bed while her mother screamed, about the hands that dragged her out, about the van that smelled like oil and fear, about the first room where they kept her, cold and dark and alone. She told Elena about the transfers, 3 of them in 6 months, different houses, different men, different rules to learn and break and be punished for breaking, about learning to be silent because noise brought pain, about learning to be still because movement brought attention. She told Dom about the worst parts, the things she whispered to him late at night, curled in her bed, her small hand gripping his fingers while he sat in his chair and listened without interrupting, things that made him want to burn the world down, things that made the hunt for Viktor Kozlov feel less like justice and more like holy obligation. Dom's wound hadn't fully healed, but he didn't care. He worked from the estate, coordinating through secure channels, directing an operation that spanned 3 states and 2 countries. Every contact he had, every ally, every enemy who owed him a favor, all of them were mobilized. Eyes watching borders, ears listening to chatter, hands ready to grab when the moment came. Kozlov was running. After the failed assault on the Caruso estate, he had gone underground, moving north toward the Canadian border, trying to reach connections who could smuggle him overseas. Tony tracked him through satellite imagery and hacked communications. Marco coordinated the teams, positioning men like chess pieces across New England. Then Tony found something else. Boss. His voice was strange when he called Dom to the tech center. You need to see this. The screen showed a database. Names, photographs, dates, children. 47 of them. 47 faces staring out from the screen, ranging in age from 4 to 12. Boys and girls. Blonde and brunette. Blue eyes, brown eyes, green eyes. All of them taken, all of them sold, all of them gone. 5 years of records, 5 years of stolen children, and Lily was number 48, the only one who had escaped. Dom stared at the faces. 47 families destroyed. 47 sets of parents murdered or left to wonder forever what happened to their children. 47 lives erased so that monsters could profit. Get me a secure line, Dom said quietly. Marco raised an eyebrow. To whom? The FBI. The room went silent. Dom had built his empire on one fundamental principle. Never involve the law. Never cooperate. Never trust anyone with a badge. The FBI had spent decades trying to build a case against the Caruso family, and Dom had spent decades making sure they failed. But this was different. This was 47 children. The call connected 20 minutes later. The woman on the other end had a voice like cold steel. This is Agent Sarah Mitchell, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Crimes Against Children Unit. To whom am I speaking? Dominic Caruso. Silence. Mr. Caruso. Mitchell's tone shifted, becoming guarded. This is unexpected. I have information about a human trafficking network, Dom said. Names, routes, buyers, evidence connecting Viktor Kozlov to 47 child abductions over 5 years. More silence. That's quite a claim. I have the proof, and I'm willing to provide all of it. In exchange for what? Exactly. Dom looked through the window at the upper floor of the estate, where Lily was sleeping in her room with Rosa watching over her. 2 things, he said. First, I want your help with legal custody of a child, Lily Grace Hartley. Her parents are dead, and she has no living relatives. And second, Dom's voice hardened, I want 5 minutes alone with Viktor Kozlov before your people take him into custody. The law office of Harrison and Associates occupied the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston. Neutral ground, secure, the kind of place where enemies could sit across a table and negotiate without anyone reaching for a weapon. Dom arrived with Marco at his side. Agent Sarah Mitchell was already waiting, flanked by 2 other federal agents and a stack of files thick enough to stop a bullet. She was younger than Dom had expected. Mid-40s. Sharp eyes, no wedding ring, the kind of woman who had sacrificed everything personal for a career spent hunting the worst humanity had to offer. She looked at him the way she probably looked at every criminal she'd ever faced, with cold, professional assessment. Mr. Caruso. She didn't extend her hand. Let's begin. Dom placed a flash drive on the table. Everything, he said. Names of 47 children trafficked through Kozlov's network over 5 years. Transit routes through 6 states. Financial records linking payments to buyers across 3 continents. Client lists including 17 individuals currently holding public office in various countries. Mitchell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Hunger, the look of a predator scenting blood. In exchange, 2 things. Full immunity for myself and my associates regarding any activities connected to this case, and your support in my petition to adopt Lily Grace Hartley. Mitchell leaned back in her chair. The immunity I can work with. The evidence you're offering would justify that arrangement. She paused. But the adoption? That's more complicated. Why? Because you're Dominic Caruso. Mitchell opened one of her files, spreading pages across the table. Head of the Caruso crime family, suspected of ordering at least 12 murders, connected to racketeering, money laundering, and illegal weapons trafficking. No court in this country will hand a child to a man with your record. Dom's jaw tightened. Suspected, not convicted. That's semantics, and you know it. What I know, Dom said slowly, is that a 5-year-old girl was sold like livestock. Her parents were murdered. She was tortured, starved, and passed between monsters for 6 months. And when she finally escaped, she ran to me. She chose me. Mitchell's expression remained neutral. Emotional appeals don't change legal realities. Then I'll change the legal realities. How? Dom met her gaze directly. I'll step down. From everything. I'll transfer control of all operations to my consigliere. I'll cooperate with ongoing investigations, within limits. I'll become, on paper and in practice, a retired businessman with no criminal affiliations. Marco shifted beside him but said nothing. Mitchell studied Dom for a long moment. You'd give up your empire. For one child. She called me daddy. The words hung in the air, raw, unguarded. Do you know who the last person to call me that was? Agent Mitchell? Dom's voice dropped. My sister, Isabella. She was 8 years old. 20 years ago. She was taken from our home by men very much like Viktor Kozlov. I was 17. I was supposed to protect her. He paused. I arrived too late. She died because I wasn't fast enough, and I have spent every day since then becoming the kind of man that no one could ever take from again. Silence filled the conference room. But Lily, Dom's voice cracked slightly. Lily looks at me like I'm already her father, and I will tear down everything I've built, everything I've become, if it means I get to keep that. Mitchell looked at him. Not at the mob boss, not at the criminal, at the man underneath, the one who had been carrying guilt like a stone for 2 decades. I can't promise anything, she said finally, but I'll write a report supporting your petition, and I'll testify on your behalf if it comes to that. Dom nodded once. Miles away, in the sunlit kitchen of the Caruso estate, Lily sat at the table with crayons and paper. She drew carefully, her tongue poking out in concentration. Rosa watched from across the room, pretending to fold laundry while stealing glances at the artwork taking shape. When Lily finished, she held up the picture proudly. 4 figures stood in a row, a tall man with dark hair, an old woman with kind eyes, a laughing man with broad shoulders, and in the center, smaller than the rest, A little girl with yellow hair and a purple dress. Above them, in wobbly letters, Lily had written a single word: family. Rosa set down the laundry, walked over, looked at the drawing, and burst into tears. Grandma? Lily's voice was worried. Why you cry? Rosa knelt down and pulled the girl into a gentle hug, careful of her healing shoulder. Because I'm happy, little one. Because I'm so happy. Dom's phone buzzed in the conference room. He glanced at the screen. Luca. Found him. Cabin near the Vermont border. 15 miles from the crossing. He's wounded, running low on men. We have eyes on him now. Dom's grip tightened on the phone. Do you want us to move? Luca asked. No. Dom stood up from the table. Wait for me. I'm coming myself. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that wound through Vermont forest like a forgotten scar. Snow dusted the ground, the first breath of winter creeping down from Canada. The nearest neighbor was 12 miles away. The border was 15. Dom arrived alone. His men had the perimeter secured, invisible in the trees, but he walked the final 100 yards by himself. That was the agreement. 30 minutes before the FBI tactical team arrived. 30 minutes of privacy. 30 minutes with Victor Kozlov. The cabin door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the smell of blood and desperation hung in the cold air. A fire had burned down to embers in the stone hearth. Scattered across a wooden table were stacks of cash, false passports, a satellite phone with a cracked screen. And in the corner, slumped against the wall, sat Victor Kozlov. He looked nothing like the polished predator who had called Dom 2 weeks ago. His left arm was wrapped in bloody bandages. His face was pale, stubbled, hollowed by days of running. His expensive suit was torn and stained, but his eyes were still the same, cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who saw human beings as inventory. When he saw Dom step through the doorway, he laughed. Caruso. The word came out as a wheeze. You came all this way for me? I'm flattered. Dom said nothing. He closed the door behind him and stood there, gun in hand, watching. Let me guess, Kozlov continued, shifting painfully against the wall. This is about the girl. Little Lily. He shook his head. $2 million. An entire war. Dozens of men dead on both sides. All for one child. Still, Dom said nothing. Was it worth it? Kozlov asked. Was she worth all of this? You killed her parents. I killed a lot of parents. Kozlov shrugged with his good shoulder. Supply and demand, Caruso. Children don't grow on trees. You want premium product? You eliminate complications. It's just business. 47 children. Dom's voice was quiet. 47 families destroyed. 48, actually. Your little Lily was number 48. Though I suppose she doesn't count now, does she? Since you stole her from me, she was never yours. Kozlov's smile twisted. She was mine the moment her father's blood hit the floor. She was mine through every transfer, every holding facility, every inspection. I owned her for 6 months. Caruso. Do you know what 6 months is in my business? An eternity. That child belongs to me more than she'll ever belong to you. Dom raised his gun. The barrel pointed directly at Kozlov's forehead. 1 shot. That's all it would take. 1 bullet and the monster who had destroyed 48 families would cease to exist. Kozlov didn't flinch. Go ahead, he said softly. Pull the trigger. We both know you want to. We both know you've killed for less. Dom's finger rested on the trigger. You're just like me, Caruso. Don't pretend otherwise. We're both predators. Both monsters. The only difference is I'm honest about what I am. We are nothing alike. No? How many men have you killed? How many lives have you destroyed? You wrap yourself in codes and honor, but underneath, you're the same as me. A wolf in expensive clothing. Dom's grip tightened. He saw Isabella, 8 years old, brown curls, gap-toothed smile, lying in a shallow grave because he hadn't been fast enough, hadn't been strong enough, hadn't been there. He saw Lily, 5 years old, blue eyes, calling him daddy, looking at him like he was the safest place in the world. She asked me once, Dom said quietly, if I was a good person. Kozlov raised an eyebrow. And what did you tell her? I didn't know how to answer. Dom lowered the gun. Kozlov's eyes widened slightly. Surprise, then relief. I knew it, he breathed. I knew you didn't have the but I know one thing. Dom cut him off. I know who I want to become. I want to become the person that little girl thinks I am. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. And that person, Dom continued, doesn't come home with blood on his hands. Not anymore. He stepped back as the door crashed open. FBI agents flooded the cabin, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Kozlov was dragged to his feet, handcuffs clicking around his wrists, his face contorted with fury. "This isn't over, Caruso," he screamed. "You think you've won? You think you can just—" The agents hauled him away, his voice fading into the winter air. Agent Mitchell appeared at Dom's side. "You could have killed him," she said quietly. "No one would have blamed you." Dom looked at her. "There's a little girl waiting for me at home," he said. "She made me promise I'd come back, and I don't want to come back as the man I used to be." Mitchell studied him for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression, something that looked almost like respect. "Go home, Mr. Caruso." She reached into her jacket and pulled out an envelope. "And take this with you. I have some good news about your adoption petition." Dawn broke over Boston in shades of pink and gold. The black SUV pulled through the gates of the Caruso estate, just as the first rays of sunlight touched the roof. Dom sat in the back seat, exhaustion carved into every line of his face, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing down on his shoulders. But none of that mattered when he saw the front door. Lily stood on the steps in her pajamas, Rosa's hand resting on her good shoulder. She was bouncing on her toes, her face pressed against the glass panels beside the door, watching the driveway with desperate intensity. The moment the car stopped, she was running. Dom barely had time to open the door before she crashed into him, her small arms wrapping around his legs with all the strength her healing body could muster. "Daddy back!" she cried, her voice breaking with joy and relief. "Daddy back! Daddy back!" Dom dropped to his knees on the cold gravel, pulling her into his arms, holding her against his chest like she might disappear if he let go. "I'm back," he whispered into her hair. "I'm here." Lily pulled away just enough to look at his face, her blue eyes searching, making sure he was real. "Daddy, promise come back," she said seriously. "Daddy, keep promise." "Always," Dom said. "Always, sweetheart." Lily's eyes suddenly widened. She reached toward his jacket, her small fingers patting the pocket over his heart. "Bear?" she asked anxiously. "Where bear?" Dom reached inside and pulled out the teddy bear. It was clean now. Rosa had washed it while he was gone, but the stuffing was slightly lumpy from everything it had been through. Lily grabbed it and hugged it tight, then looked up at Dom with a smile that could have melted steel. "Daddy, keep Bear safe, like promise." "I promised," Dom said simply. Rosa helped them both inside, where the warmth of the house wrapped around them like an embrace. Luca was waiting in the foyer, looking relieved. Marco sat in the study, already working through reports. Over the next few days, the news trickled in. Viktor Kozlov had been formally charged with 53 federal counts, including human trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and racketeering. The evidence Dom had provided, combined with testimony from surviving victims, guaranteed he would never see freedom again. The 47 files had been reopened. Working from the data Tony had extracted, FBI teams had raided holding facilities in 3 states, rescuing 12 children who were still in transit. 12 families who had given up hope suddenly had reason to believe again. Lily would be called as a witness eventually, but Agent Mitchell had arranged special protections. No courtroom appearances, recorded testimony only, her identity sealed from public records, and the adoption petition moved forward. Dom's lawyers filed the paperwork within a week. The hearing was scheduled for 3 months later, to give the court time to review the unusual circumstances. Unusual was an understatement. A mob boss seeking to adopt an orphan trafficking victim was unprecedented. The judge assigned to the case, Victoria Chen, had requested extensive documentation, character witnesses, psychological evaluations, home studies. The reports came in one by one. Dr. Elena testified to Lily's remarkable recovery and the clear bond she had formed with Dom. Mrs. Rosa described 30 years of watching Dominic Caruso grow from a grieving boy into a man who had never stopped searching for redemption. Agent Mitchell submitted a written statement acknowledging Dom's cooperation in dismantling Kozlov's network and recommending favorable consideration. But there was one condition everyone agreed on. Dom had to step away from everything. He sat in his study late one night, looking at the documents spread across his desk. 20 years of building an empire. 20 years of becoming the thing that monsters feared. All of it represented in contracts, deeds, accounts, and alliance agreements. Marco would take over. The transition would be gradual, invisible to outsiders. The Caruso family would continue, just without Dominic at its head. Dom looked up from the papers. Across the room, Lily had fallen asleep on the leather sofa, curled into a ball, with her teddy bear tucked under her chin. The lamplight caught the gold in her hair. Her breathing was slow and peaceful. Safe. He looked back at the empire laid out before him, then at the sleeping child. 20 years of blood and power and fear, versus one small girl who called him Daddy. The choice wasn't difficult at all. The Boston family court building stood gray and imposing against a clear March sky. 3 months had passed since the night in Vermont. 3 months of paperwork, evaluations, interviews, and waiting. Today, the waiting would end. Lily walked up the courthouse steps, holding Dom's hand, her small fingers wrapped tightly around his. She wore a pink dress with white lace trim that Rosa had spent 2 weeks selecting. Her hair was braided into 2 neat plaits tied with matching ribbons. She looked, for the first time since Dom had found her in that alley, like an ordinary little girl. Dom wore navy blue, not his usual black, not the color of shadows and power and intimidation. Navy blue, because Lily had pointed to it in his closet the night before and said, "This one, Daddy, this color is prettier." So navy blue it was. The courtroom was smaller than Dom had expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, an American flag standing in the corner. Judge Victoria Chen sat behind an elevated bench, reading glasses perched on her nose, a stack of files spread before her. Rosa sat in the front row of the gallery. Luca and Marco sat behind her. Dr. Elena waited in the witness area, and Agent Sarah Mitchell sat in the back, watching with unreadable eyes. The hearing began with testimony. Dr. Elena spoke first, her voice calm and professional, but her eyes kept drifting to the little girl in the pink dress. "In my 20 years of pediatric medicine, I have never witnessed a child recover from severe trauma as quickly as Lily has," she said. "The physical wounds healed within weeks. The psychological wounds, the selective mutism, the hypervigilance, the dissociation, have improved dramatically." She paused. "That kind of recovery doesn't happen in isolation. It happens because the child feels safe. Because they have someone who makes them feel safe. Lily has that with Mr. Caruso." Mrs. Rosa took the stand next, her weathered hands clasped in her lap. "I have known Dominic since the day he was born," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I watched him grow from a boy into a man. I watched him suffer. I watched him close himself off after losing his sister." She looked at Lily, then at Dom, "But I always knew his heart was good. He buried it deep, but it was always there. This child found it. She found the part of him he thought was dead." Agent Mitchell's testimony was brief but powerful. "Mr. Caruso surrendered control of his entire organization to cooperate with federal authorities," she stated. "The intelligence he provided led to the rescue of 12 additional trafficking victims and the dismantling of a network that had operated for over 5 years. His actions saved lives. Whatever he was before, I believe he is trying to become something different now." Finally, Judge Chen turned her attention to Lily. "Lily," she said gently, "do you understand why we're here today?" Lily nodded. "Man in dress want to know if Daddy can keep Lily." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom. Even Judge Chen's lips twitched. "That's right," Chen said, "and I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" "Okay. Do you know that Mr. Caruso wants to adopt you? To become your father legally?" "Yes." "And how do you feel about that?" Lily was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration, the way it did when she was trying to find the right words. "He not Mr.," she said finally. "He, Daddy. Can you tell me more about that?" Lily looked at Dom, then back at the judge. "Daddy, save Lily. Bad men want take Lily. Daddy say no. Daddy fight bad men. Daddy get hurt for Lily." Her voice grew stronger. "Daddy never hit Lily. Never yell at Lily. Daddy hold Lily when Lily's scared. Daddy read stories at night. Daddy keep teddy bear safe when Lily ask." She straightened in her chair, her blue eyes meeting the judge's directly. "Lily won't stay with Daddy. Forever. Please." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Chen looked down at the file before her, looked at the man in the navy blue suit, looked at the little girl in the pink dress, who had survived horrors no child should know, and somehow found her way to something that looked like hope. And slowly, Judge Victoria Chen smiled. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Victoria Chen removed her reading glasses and set them carefully on the bench. She looked at the stack of files before her, then at the man in the navy blue suit, then at the little girl in the pink dress who sat beside him, their hands intertwined. "I have reviewed all evidence, testimony, and reports submitted in this case," Chen began, her voice measured and deliberate. "I must say, in my 22 years on the bench, this is one of the most unusual cases I have ever presided over." Dom's grip on Lily's hand tightened. She squeezed back. "Mr. Caruso, your past is not ideal." The judge's eyes met his directly. "The court is aware of allegations, investigations, and associations that would normally disqualify any petitioner." Dom didn't look away, didn't flinch. He had made peace with who he had been. What mattered now was who he was choosing to become. However, Chen continued, this court does not judge solely on the past. We evaluate the present. We consider the future. We ask one fundamental question. What is in the best interest of the child? She turned her gaze to Lily. Lily Grace Hartley has endured things that no child should ever endure. She witnessed violence. She suffered abuse. She was treated as property by people who saw her as nothing more than merchandise. Rosa pressed a hand over her mouth. Luca stared at the floor. And yet, Chen said, her voice softening, she sits here today, healthy, healing, and loved. She has found safety. She has found a home. She has found a father. The judge picked up her gavel. This court hereby approves the adoption petition filed by Dominic Caruso. From this day forward, Lily Grace Hartley shall be legally known as Lily Grace Caruso, with all rights and privileges afforded to a natural-born child. The gavel fell. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Lily turned to Dom, her blue eyes enormous, shimmering with tears she didn't understand. Mean. Daddy is Lily's real daddy now? Dom's voice cracked. He had commanded armies. He had faced death without flinching. But this moment broke him completely. It means, he said, his words thick with emotion, you are my real daughter now. Lily's face transformed. Joy, relief, disbelief. Love, everything she had been afraid to hope for, suddenly became real. Lily loved Daddy, she cried, throwing her arms around his neck. Dom held her like he would never let go, like every moment of darkness in his life had been leading to this single point of light. I love you too, he whispered. 3 words. 3 words he hadn't spoken in 20 years. Not since Isabella, not since he had buried his heart alongside his sister in that cold Newark cemetery. But now, finally, his heart was beating again. Rosa wept openly, not even trying to hide it. Luca turned away, but his shoulders shook. Marco, the old consigliere who had seen everything, who had weathered decades of violence and loss without expression, smiled, a real smile. Rare and precious as diamonds. Agent Mitchell stood quietly in the back of the courtroom, watching. She gave Dom a single nod. Respect, hard-earned and freely given. Outside the courthouse, the spring sun was blinding, and there, lining the steps, stood the Caruso family. Not the crime family, not soldiers and enforcers, just people, men who had worked alongside Dom for years, who had watched him transform over the past months, who had come to witness this moment. When Dom emerged with Lily on his shoulders, they erupted. Cheers, applause, whistles, grown men with tattooed arms and scarred knuckles, crying and laughing and celebrating like children themselves. Lily looked down at them from her perch, her eyes wide with wonder. Daddy, she said, tugging his hair gently. Who are they? Dom looked up at his daughter. His daughter. The words sang in his chest. They are your family, sweetheart, he said. Your big family. Lily considered this for a moment. Then she raised her small hand and waved. The cheering doubled. And there, on the steps of the Boston family court, surrounded by the most unlikely family imaginable, Lily Grace Caruso laughed. A real laugh, full and free and beautiful. The sound of a child who had finally found her way home. Dear friends, thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If this journey touched your heart, if you felt the tears and the joy and the hope that Lily and Dominic found together, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose heart might be healed by a story of redemption and love. We would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us, what did this story mean to you? Have you ever witnessed someone transform through the power of love? Have you ever been saved by someone who believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself? Share your thoughts. Share your feelings. We read every single comment, and your words inspire us to keep creating stories that matter. Thank you for being part of our community. Thank you for caring about stories that celebrate the best of humanity. We wish you good health, happiness, and peace in your daily life. May you find your family, wherever they may be. May you never stop believing that goodness exists, even in the darkest places. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video.